This is KGW News at Sunrise.
You might see it on the news and say, oh, that would never happen to me. And then yesterday was my day. It did happen to me.
That woman says a young teen tried to trick her into getting out of her car in Southeast Portland by concocting a story that something was wrong with her vehicle. And she's not the only victim. We have her story coming up. And we are previewing part 2 of our week-long mental health series, Counseled Inside Our Schools. Today, we're heading to Sinton Elementary in the St. John's area to get a feel for how students are doing there this year. Plus,
it's so bad because the radars aren't there that need to cover that region, and the fact we have terrain which blocks the radar.
That University of Washington professor is talking about a 200-mile stretch along the Oregon coastline that is not covered by weather radar. We'll talk about closing that gap coming up here in just a few minutes.
Good Tuesday morning. Thank you for watching this morning. Is the radar fired up right now?
We're going to fire it up. Yes, it's turned on.
Let's see it, Rod. I can't wait.
Some showers out there. You know, that is real. The fact that we could use the pushes to get a radar site down in Newport. Last time the feds were writing checks to do that, they put one up along the central Washington coast, and we in Oregon lost out. Maybe next time we'll be more fortunate. You can see showers running south to north up the valley right now. Not a lot out there, but we've had showers overnight, so roads are probably wet in your neighborhood. 38 is the early morning number. 44 at noon, 48 for a high today. Like yesterday, sunbreaks will lead to hail showers. Unlike yesterday, if we have some showers fire up this morning over the higher terrain, that could be snow sticking at about 1,000 feet. Back to you.
All right, more from Rod coming up here shortly. We're going to start our news coverage this hour, though, with a story that we shared yesterday here on Sunrise about thieves using fake car emergencies to steal from unsuspecting drivers. KGW's Mike Benner brings us the latest after speaking to a woman who says she was targeted in this scheme this past weekend.
Fortunately, I trusted my instincts.
Laura Probst is breathing a sigh of relief after an unsettling encounter late Sunday afternoon. She says she was driving along Southeast Woodstock near Reed College when the driver in the car behind her started honking and flashing the high beams. Probst says she eventually pulled over near Lutz Tavern, and the car behind her did the same thing. She says a young boy in the passenger seat shouted at her to get out of the car because her car's exhaust system was acting up. Probst thought the whole thing was fishy and drove home immediately.
My heart was racing and I was really shaky. And I walked in and told my boyfriend what happened.
And it appears Probst wasn't alone. 4 other women reported to police that between noon and 1 Sunday, some guys got them to pull over by saying their gas tank was smoking or car was leaking fluids. One of these incidents happened on Southeast Oaks Parkway, another one on Southeast Crystal Springs Boulevard. We're told one woman had her car stolen, one had her purse stolen, the others managed to get away. Just like Laura Probst, who's convinced the same 2 people are behind it all.
Yeah, it was scary. I was terrified. I've never had anything happen to me before. It was one of those situations where, you might see it on the news and say, oh, that would never happen to me. And then yesterday was my day. It did happen to me.
I'm Mike Benner for KGW News.
Now to a developing story out of Vancouver. Police are asking for help finding a man they call armed and dangerous. 40-year-old Kenneth DeBurn is accused of shooting another man early yesterday morning in the parking lot of an apartment complex in Hazel Dell. Police say he knew the victim, who is expected to survive. Authorities say that he led them on a chase, crashed his getaway car and then ran away. He also has a felony warrant out of Clackamas County. Now to today's morning headlines. Lawmakers in Salem are trying to make it easier for people to survive drug overdoses. Oregon House Bill 2395 passed with bipartisan support yesterday. It's called the Opioid Harm Reduction Package and would make things like naloxone kits, which can reverse fentanyl overdoses, more available in public places like schools, grocery stores, and restaurants. The bill also decriminalizes fentanyl test strips. It passed 48-9 and now heads to the Senate. A Clackamas County company is recalling over 100 pounds of ready-to-eat salads because they're mislabeled. This Trader Joe's lemon chicken and arugula salad contains wheat, but that wasn't disclosed to buyers because the label on the back is actually from a different salad. They were made in late February by GH Foods Northwest. If you have one in your fridge now and are allergic to wheat, you could toss it or return it to the store that you bought it from. And a slow-moving landslide has closed Timber Road. Look at that crack. It is a rural street in Washington County between highways 26 and 6. So the crack first started forming in January, but movement here has recently increased. The county says it's working on a way to stabilize the area before it reopens. For now, Timber Road is closed indefinitely between Strassel and Cochrane roads. And those are some of your morning headlines.
If you want a job growing or selling magic mushrooms, Oregon Psilocybin Services is now approving worker permits and licenses. OPS is in charge of implementing the legalization of psilocybin, the hallucinogenic chemical found in certain strains of mushrooms. Voters approved Measure 110 back in 2020, making Oregon the first state in the nation to create a legal framework to access psilocybin services. OPS started accepting applications in early January. So take a look at the list. 164 licenses have been submitted. More than 140 of those are worker permits. So far, 39 have been approved.
Our next story this morning starts with this live look at the weather radar because we're talking about a gap in radar coverage. In fact, it's a gap along the Oregon coast. They say it's one of the worst gaps in the country. KGW meteorologist Joe Ranieri has more.
Last month's snowstorm was legendary, shutting down the city and forcing drivers to abandon their cars along the side of highways and freeways.
Certainly would have helped in the short range. Now, I'm not saying it would help in the 48-hour forecast. It won't. But for the 0 to 6 or 12 hours, having a coastal radar could have been useful.
This record-breaking snowstorm that dropped nearly a foot of snow at the Portland International Airport and nearly 8 inches in downtown was tough to track. One part of the problem, Oregon's radar system.
Well, it's so bad because the radars aren't there that need to cover that region, and the fact we have terrain which blocks the radar. So, we have the Cascades that are very effective in blocking radar at low levels and the coastal range.
I'll admit it wasn't just the poor radar system to blame for the high snowfall totals, but it's a well-known fact that our radar coverage in Oregon is the worst in the lower 48 states. Just take a look at this map that shows how big the gap is in coverage along parts of the coast.
There's a Portland radar, which sees the Willamette Valley, but is essentially blocked at low levels by the coastal range.
Dr. Cliff Mass, a professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of Washington in Seattle, says there's about 200 miles of coastline that doesn't get picked up by radar.
That's the problem. If there's a convective line coming in, or a unforeseen low pressure center, or whatever, you can't see it coming in on the Oregon coast.
Case in point, the Manzanita tornado back in the fall of 2016, when residents only got alerts on their phones that a tornado was coming.
So the only real coastal coverage right now in the Northwest is from the Langley Hill radar, which we put in. There was a lot of work to get that radar, and that's at Hoquiam.
It's not an easy fix. A new radar for the coast would cost millions of dollars.
I have one plan in which we get the radar on Mount Ashland and near Medford, which is not doing very, very well because it's so high. Move that to the coast and put a less expensive radar there in Medford.
Mass says it'll take political movement to get things done.
You need your U.S. senators from Oregon to push this very hard. It could happen, but they will have to do that.
Joe Ranieri, KGW News.
One follow-up to Joe's report, there's also a gap in radar coverage in parts of Central Oregon as well. So at this point, we have 3 radar sites in Oregon. I know you know this. One in Scappoose, one in Pendleton, and one in Medford.
Yeah, and this, again, I mentioned to start the show, the last time the feds were handing out checks, they got a new one at Langley Hill along the Central Coast in Washington, and we lost out. But the only time radar picks up anything down in Newport from Portland is if the storm has a very high base of moisture in it, because the radar beams are really high by the time it gets down there. So except for the strongest storms, you don't see much. And also, I want to be clear. To use radar as a scapegoat into why that snow forecast was missed is utter nonsense. That had zero zero to do with why that storm was missed. For starters, that storm developed off the mouth of the Columbia River. That's right in the channel of the Portland radar. It has nothing to do with Newport.
Well, I'm glad you shared that because that was the topic of conversation in our pre-show meeting this morning at 3:45. And I thought, I wonder if the viewers will be able to hear Rod's thoughts on this. You just did. There you go.
So here we go. I mean, what I blew as a forecaster that day was looking back, and whenever I miss something, I document it and figure out why I was an idiot. The forecast should have been developing snow with dropping temperatures into the Willamette Valley an hour or so after the east wind started to blow. Remember, we had the snow out near the gorge first, and then it swept into the Portland area. So that should have been the forecast. Developing snow into the afternoon. I probably would have said a good 4 inches, which would have been enough for people to get home early. I still didn't see enough moisture to do what it did, and that was 8, 9, 10 inches of snow in the area. Okay, what's going on right now? Well, here's rain moving up from south to north in the area. The same weather pattern we had yesterday. Yesterday, the low that was driving this was parked here. Now there's a low that's parked down here. But it's the same overall weather pattern. Another cool pool of air. Snow levels for sticking snow again this morning near 1,000 feet. We ended up with 1 to 2 inches of snow in places like Prune Hill out in Camas and in Washougal, the hills, and out in Sandy. They had 1 to 2 inches of snow yesterday morning that went on to melt during the day. Not seeing as active precipitation on radar this morning as we did 24 hours ago. So right now I would think that's not really likely. 35 in Salem is the temperature. In fact, Futurecast, here we are at 8:30 this morning, and here we are going into the afternoon. If this is correct, it shows very little precipitation this morning. What it does show is one band later today, here we are at 6 p.m., that would be a hail shower moving up through the area. We had late afternoon hail showers yesterday that produced pea-size hail. Mainly that was on the west side out in Washington County and moved up into parts of Clark County. So showers of PM hail, a possibility again today. Still watching the low snow levels. Daytime highs getting well up into the 40s. Actually had a lot of you south of Portland make it to 50 yesterday. So if we get enough sun, that could happen again today. We'll go 48 in Battleground and 48 in Vancouver. Similar weather tomorrow. Thursday, snow levels start to go up. Rain picks up for a fairly wet day eventually into Friday. Saturday looks to be pretty quiet with a few showers. Rain picks up again on Sunday to Monday, and that's your forecast.
Okay, thank you, Rod.